The German Shepherd vanished beneath the Passaic River as Navy SEAL Gideon Shaw clipped into a rescue line. He pulled her from the current with a broken leash still hanging from her collar, but the exhausted dog refused the waiting veterinary van. She rose on trembling legs and dragged him upstream, away from every rescue boat. Would you have trusted her enough to follow? The German Shepherd vanished beneath the brown water before Gideon Shaw could reach the edge of the downstream service launch. 1 second, her muzzle was above the current, teeth scraping against a waterlogged piling. The next, a slab of driftwood rolled between them and erased her from view. Gideon dropped the orange equipment bag he had been carrying. Dog in the water, 40 yards downstream. Captain Rosa Alvarez turned before the bag hit the pavement. Around them, the river rescue drill they had spent the afternoon conducting became real with the efficiency of a door slamming shut. 2 firefighters ran for the downstream line. Someone shut off the portable generator. The engine noise vanished, leaving rainwater ticking from the sycamores and the hard rush of the Passaic River against concrete. Gideon clipped a tether to his harness. "Shaw, wait for the second swimmer," Rosa ordered. He pointed. The dog surfaced beyond the driftwood, one black ear flattened, front paws striking at nothing. A broken leash trailed from her collar and wrapped once around the piling. "She doesn't have that long." Rosa looked once, measured the same distance he had, then grabbed the tether behind him. "You stay on my line." That mattered. 2 years earlier, Gideon might have heard only the first half of the sentence. He might have mistaken speed for permission and courage for being the man closest to danger. Now, he tugged the connection twice, waited for Rosa's answering pull, and entered from the lower edge of the service launch. The river struck harder than it looked. Warm rain had swollen it with cold runoff, branches, plastic bottles, and the small, loose pieces of a city that never expected to be carried away. Gideon moved diagonally instead of fighting straight across. His rescue vest pressed against his ribs. The tether tightened, eased, then tightened again as Rosa and the shore team fed him line. The dog disappeared a second time. Gideon reached the piling and found the leash pulled taut beneath the surface. He went down by feel, mud closed over his gloves. His left hand found braided nylon, then the metal clip, then fur. The dog twisted when he touched her, not aggression, panic. Her hindquarters had been pulled against the wood while the current forced her head downstream. Gideon caught the handle of her harness and lifted until her muzzle broke the surface. She dragged in one rough breath. "Easy," he said, though the word belonged more to him than to her. "I've got you." Claws hammered the submerged piling inches from his wrist. Scrape, slip, scrape, then stopped. For a heartbeat, the stillness was worse than the struggle. Gideon hooked his forearm beneath the dog's chest and found the leash with his free hand. It had wound into a fork in the wood. Pulling harder would tighten it. He pushed closer to the piling, let the current turn his shoulder, and worked the frayed end backward through the narrow gap. Rosa gave one sharp pull on the tether. Status. He answered twice. "Hold." The leash came loose. The current seized both of them immediately. Gideon rolled onto his back, locked the dog against his chest, and raised one arm. Rosa's team hauled in the line. Water broke over his face. The German Shepherd did not fight now. Her weight rested against him with the terrible surrender of an animal that had spent its last strength before anyone arrived. Boots splashed into the shallows. Hands took the harness, then Gideon's shoulder straps. Together, they pulled the dog onto the wet concrete. Dr. Leah Kim was already kneeling beside a thermal blanket. She had volunteered to demonstrate field stabilization for working animals during the drill, a detail Rosa had joked was too specific to be useful on an ordinary Thursday. Leah said nothing about the joke now. She checked the dog's airway, listened to her chest, and positioned her carefully, while an emergency medical technician brought oxygen. "Female," Leah said. "Adult. Pulse is rapid but steady." Gideon remained on one knee, river water pouring from his sleeves. The dog coughed and drew another breath. Her coat was black and tan beneath the mud, the fur dense around her neck and shoulders. 6 years old, perhaps. Old enough to understand a leash, young enough that someone would be waiting for her to come home. Rosa crouched beside Gideon. Rain had darkened the shoulders of her uniform shirt, though the storm itself had moved east an hour earlier. "You stayed on the line. You sound surprised." "I'm documenting personal growth." He almost smiled. "Put it in the training report." Her expression softened for half a second before she looked toward the river. "Did you see anyone else?" No. The answer sat badly between them. The dog wore a red nylon collar beneath her harness. Gideon waited until Leah nodded before touching it. A silver tag hung below the buckle, scratched but readable. Nix. The reverse carried a name and number. Elena Velez. If alone, please call. That's not a message people engrave for decoration, Rosa said. Gideon looked at the broken leash. The upper section was missing, but the end attached to Nix had not been chewed. The nylon fibers had stretched pale before separating, as though the line had taken the combined force of the animal and the river. Rosa stood and pointed toward the command trailer. Start an open water grid from this piling, boats downstream first, drone on both banks. Ask dispatch for any calls involving a woman, a dog, or somebody failing to come home. The drill site changed shape around them. Training markers were pulled from the water. A rescue boat rolled down the ramp. A firefighter launched the drone from the roof of the trailer, while another unfolded a map across the hood of Rosa's truck. Gideon watched the river rather than the equipment. The current bent around a bridge support 300 yards downstream, forming a dark seam where floating branches accelerated and disappeared. If Elena had entered the water upstream of the piling, the search direction was obvious. Water carried evidence the way gravity carried a dropped tool, down and away. But the dog had not arrived alone. Somewhere there was another end to that leash. Leah covered Nix with the silver-lined blanket and fitted a loose oxygen mask near her muzzle. She aspirated some water, but she's moving air. Body temperature is down. I want her transported as soon as she's stable. Can she tell us anything? A young firefighter asked. Leah glanced up. She's a dog, Aaron. I meant the chip. Then ask the question you mean. She passed the scanner over Nix's shoulders. It chirped near the left side of her neck. There, registered chip. The firefighter copied the number. Rosa was already calling the contact on the tag. Gideon stepped away to strip off his outer gear. His hands performed the routine without instruction. Release buckle, check tether, coil line, inspect clip. Order returned through repetition. That was why procedure mattered. It kept one emergency from becoming two. It gave frightened people something dependable to do. It could also point every boat in the wrong direction if the first assumption was wrong. He looked back at Nix. Her eyes were closed. One ear remained folded beneath the blanket. Mud streaked her face, but the red collar was clean along one narrow section, as if a hand had recently gripped it. Rosa reached a voicemail greeting and ended the call without leaving details. Dispatch found no missing person report under Elena Velez. The microchip registry gave the same number, plus an emergency contact named Miles Carter. Rosa dialed. A man answered on the third ring, breathless and distracted. Hello? Mr. Carter, this is Captain Rosa Alvarez with River Rescue. Do you know Elena Velez? The pause was brief, but every person near the stretcher heard it. She's my roommate. Why? Rosa's voice stayed level. We found her dog in the river. Is Elena with you? No, she took Nix for a walk. A chair scraped at the other end of the call. Maybe 45 minutes ago. She said the apartment was too hot after the power flickered. She always takes the river path when the rain stops. Gideon stopped coiling the rope. What was she wearing? Rosa asked. Green rain shell, black pants, red running shoes. Miles swallowed close to the phone. Captain, where did you find Nix? Rosa looked at the swollen river. We're working on that now. I need you to stay on the line with dispatch and come to the command post by the North Access Road. Do not search the bank yourself. Elena wouldn't let go of her. His words were not dramatic. That made them heavier. Near the stretcher, the loose metal clip on Nix's broken leash tapped against the aluminum rail. Tick, tick, tick. Radios quieted between transmissions, and for a moment, the small sound seemed to measure everything the river had not yet returned. Leah rested 2 fingers against Nix's neck. Her pulse is improving. Rosa gave the search teams Elena's description and changed the incident designation. What had begun as an animal rescue became a missing person operation in less than a minute. Downstream units acknowledged one after another. Boat 1, Boat 2, Shore Team East, Drone Team. Gideon spread the map beside Rosa. The dog had been found 400 yards below the public ramp. The current was fast enough to cover that distance quickly. If Elena had gone in with Nix, she might already be beyond the bridge. I'll take the west bank, he said. You'll change into dry gear first. Rosa, that river already collected one bad decision today. It doesn't get another. He met her eyes, then nodded. She was right. which was rarely comforting and often useful. Behind them, Nix coughed again. Leah reached for the oxygen mask, but the dog lifted her head before it arrived. Her amber eyes moved past Miles's name, being repeated over the radio, past the boat sliding down the ramp, past Gideon standing in dripping rescue gear. She looked upstream. Leah placed a hand against her shoulder. "Stay down, sweetheart." Nix planted one front paw on the stretcher. It trembled beneath her weight. Then the second paw found the edge. The blanket slipped from her back as she forced herself upright. She did not look toward the waiting veterinary van. She faced the darkening river path, the broken leash hanging beneath her throat, and pulled upstream. The river made the first decision for them. Everything that floated past the piling traveled downstream. Branches turned once in the current, caught the narrow black seam beneath the bridge, and accelerated. A crushed bottle flashed silver under the rescue lights before disappearing from view. If Elena Velez had entered the water near the public ramp, physics said the search should follow. Captain Rosa Alvarez drew 3 boxes on the laminated map spread across her truck hood. Boat 1 takes the center channel to the rail bridge. Boat 2 works the south bank and every debris pocket. Shore teams cover both sides. Drone stays ahead and flags anything that needs a closer look. Nobody argued, not even Gideon. He had spent enough years around moving water to know that hope did not change direction, speed, or temperature. A person separated from flotation would be carried down and away. Search managers started with what the river could prove, not what frightened witnesses wanted to believe. Behind him, Nick strained toward the upstream end of the service launch. Dr. Leah Kim kept one hand against the dog's chest and the other beneath her collar. "No." Nix tried again. Her front legs held, but her hindquarters slipped on the wet blanket. Leah steadied her before Gideon could move. "She needs the clinic," Leah said. "Warm fluids, chest imaging, observation. She's trying to go somewhere. Every frightened animal is trying to go somewhere, usually away from us." Nix did not look at the ambulance, the open veterinary van, or the people surrounding her. Her amber eyes stayed fixed on the dark line of the upstream path. Rosa finished assigning the grid and joined them. Could she know where Elena is? Leah shook her head. She could know where she last smelled Elena. She could remember their walking route. She could be frightened and trying to return home. None of those things makes her a search dog. "But none rules out the first one," Gideon said. Leah looked at his wet clothes, then at Nix. "You two met 12 minutes ago. Don't start writing legends about her." "I'm asking for a test." Rosa crossed her arms. "What kind?" Before he answered, the drone lifted above the trailer. Its white search beam crossed the water and traveled downstream, sliding over branches, bridge supports, and the oily skin of the river. Every official eye followed the light. Nix watched the darkness behind Gideon. The contrast tightened something in his chest. It was not proof. He made himself name that first. A dog's attention could be shaped by noise, wind, memory, discomfort, or 100 things he could not see. Believing too early was another way of becoming blind. "Clean scent article," he said. "Something Elena wore that hasn't been handled by 10 people. We let Nix check it. If she still chooses upstream, we walk her only as far as Leah allows. I mark every response. Rosa keeps the downstream grid." Rosa studied him. "You're proposing a parallel check, not redirecting the operation." "Correct. And if the dog wanders in a circle? Then we learn something without moving a boat." Leah pointed at Nix. 5 minutes on her feet, maybe 10 if her breathing stays clean. No running, no river edge, no one pulling her forward. If she coughs, staggers, or stops choosing on her own, we're done. Gideon nodded. Her choice, not ours. Headlights turned into the north access road before Rosa could answer. A gray hatchback stopped crooked beside the command trailer. Miles Carter emerged carrying a canvas tote against his chest. He was lean, with rain-flattened black hair and the stunned expression of a man whose evening had changed between one phone call and the next. "Where is she?" he asked. Rosa met him before he reached the ramp. "We haven't located Elena yet. The teams are searching now." Miles looked past her and saw Nix. His shoulders folded with relief, then rose again when he understood the dog was alone. "Hey, trouble," he whispered. Nix recognized him. Her ears shifted, and her tail moved once against the blanket. She did not try to cross to him. Miles stopped a few feet away, respecting the medical equipment. "She always runs to me." "She's exhausted," Leah said, "but she's stable enough for the moment." Rosa asked whether he had brought something carrying only Elena's scent. Miles opened the tote and removed a blue cotton sweatshirt sealed inside a clean grocery bag. It was on the back of her desk chair. I used gloves like Dispatch told me. He held up both hands, still wearing yellow dishwashing gloves. These were all I had. For the first time that evening, Rosa's mouth almost turned upward. They worked! Gideon crouched several feet in front of Nix while Leah loosened the thermal blanket. He set the bag on the pavement and let Miles open it. The sweatshirt carried the ordinary things no laboratory report could make meaningful: detergent, veterinary disinfectant. The faint eucalyptus shampoo Miles said Elena bought because the cheaper brand made her scalp itch. Nix lifted her muzzle before the fabric came fully out. Her nostrils moved rapidly. She leaned forward, touched the cuff once, then drew back and searched the air. Gideon did not speak. He did not point upstream. Miles stayed behind her shoulder. No one shaped the answer. Nix turned toward the river path. Leah fitted a wide temporary lead to the dog's harness rather than her collar. 5 minutes. Gideon took the loop but left slack in the line. Nix stepped off the blanket. Her first 2 strides were stiff. The third became steadier. She passed the veterinary van without looking at it and moved toward the upstream maintenance path. "Start the clock," Leah said. Rosa assigned Aaron to accompany them and remained close enough to monitor the radio. Miles followed with Elena's sweatshirt sealed again in the bag. They moved beneath dripping trees while rescue lights flashed through the branches behind them. Nix kept her nose low for several yards, then raised it into the breeze. She paused at a bench, checked its metal legs, and continued. At a trash barrel, she turned sharply, sniffed a paper cup, then dismissed it. Gideon marked the locations on his phone. Interest at the bench, no sustained alert. Trash barrel negative. Miles glanced at him. "You don't believe her. I'm making sure I don't put words in her mouth. She's never needed words. Tonight we do." The path narrowed where mud had washed across the asphalt. Nix slowed, breathing harder. Leah called time from behind them. 4 minutes. Gideon stopped. Nix stopped with him, but leaned against the harness, weight aimed upstream. "Rest," he said. She looked back at him, then toward the path. A line of water ran from her coat and gathered beneath her paws. Miles knelt nearby. Elena taught her to find her keys. She'd hide them under a cushion and say, "Where did I lose my life this time?" Nix would bring them back and get half a cheese stick. "Keys have a strong familiar scent," Gideon said. "So does Elena." There was no accusation in Miles's voice, only a fact he needed the world to honor. Leah checked Nix's gums and listened to her breathing. 2 more minutes, then I carry the medical vote. Nix moved again. 20 yards ahead, she left the center of the path and approached a strip of flattened grass. Gideon gave her line. She pushed her nose beneath a clump of wet leaves and came up with nothing. Then she moved 3 feet to the left and pawed once. Something red lay pressed into the mud. Gideon stopped everyone before they crowded it. Aaron photographed the object in place. It was a length of nylon leash, mud-darkened but unmistakably the same red as the piece attached to Nix. One end had a padded hand loop. The other had stretched into a spray of pale fibers. Miles made a small sound behind Gideon. "That's hers." "You recognize it?" Rosa asked over his shoulder. "I bought it when Nix turned 6. Elena complained the reflective stitching was too bright. Gideon compared the torn fibers without touching them. The break was consistent. 2 halves of the same line, separated by force. The river had not merely taken a loose dog. Rosa notified the command post and requested evidence bags, then looked toward Leah. "Time." Leah was already beside Nix. "She rides from here." Nix resisted when Gideon reached beneath her chest, but the resistance lasted only a second. He lifted all 65 pounds of wet fur and tired muscle against him. Her head rested above his forearm, nose working as he carried her upstream. "She can still smell," Miles said. "Smelling isn't the same as walking," Leah replied. "We protect the life we already recovered while we search for the next one." Gideon carried Nix along the higher edge of the path. Her body remained heavy, but her head turned at each opening in the brush. Most scents passed without reaction. Near a chain-link service fence, she became rigid in his arms. He stopped. Nix stretched her neck toward the fence and released one strained whine. Aaron swept his light across the metal. At first it showed only rain, vines, and scraps of paper caught against the links. Then the beam climbed. 6 feet above the river path, a strip of green fabric fluttered from a twisted wire. Miles recognized the color before anyone spoke. Her rain shell. The fence stood well above the water now. Gideon aimed his light at the mud on its lower posts. A dark stain marked the height of the earlier surge, but the fabric hung nearly 2 feet above it. Elena had not floated past that fence beneath the surface. She had reached it, climbed against it, or struck it high enough to leave part of her jacket behind. And then the river had taken her again. The green fabric changed the search, but it did not settle it. Aaron photographed the strip against the chain-link fence from 3 angles. Rosa recorded its height, the old surge stain on the post, and the distance from the broken leash. Miles identified the material as Elena's rain shell without touching it. Only then did Aaron remove it with gloves and seal it in a clear bag. Nix watched from Gideon's arms. Her nostrils moved when the bag passed, but she did not struggle to follow. The short walk had spent what the river left her. She reached this fence, Miles said. Rosa aimed her light at the crushed grass beneath it. Maybe, or the current lifted part of the jacket onto the wire. 2 feet above the surge mark. Water throws things higher than people expect. Miles pressed his lips together. Gideon understood the frustration on his face. Caution sounded cold when someone you loved was missing. It was still kinder than certainty built on a guess. He lowered Nix onto a dry section of path, while Leah checked her breathing again. "We have 2 confirmed points," he said. "The hand loop near the path and fabric on the fence. We know Elena and Nix traveled through here. We don't know in which direction after the fence." Rosa keyed her radio. "Command, shift shore team west to the upstream path between the public ramp and fence marker 7. Downstream boats maintain their existing grid. Drone team, give me 1 pass upstream along the river walk, then return to the bridge sector." Miles looked at her. "You're still sending boats the other way." "Yes, but Nix brought us here, and Elena may have gone back into the current here." Rosa pointed toward the dark water below the fence. "Until we can rule that out, I search both possibilities." The answer did not comfort him. It did something more useful. It told him no one was gambling Elena's life on a single theory. Gideon studied the path behind them. The boat ramp lay upstream, hidden by a bend in the trees. If Elena had left home 45 minutes before the first call, she and Nix could have walked from the north entrance, past this fence, reached the ramp, and fallen there. In that case, Nix was not leading them toward where the accident happened. She was retracing the route she knew. But the jacket fragment faced the wrong way for that simple explanation. It was twisted around the riverside of the wire, not the path side. He pointed it out to Rosa. "Impact from below," she said, "or someone climbing from below." Gideon checked the timestamps on Aaron's photographs. 11 minutes separated the recovery of the leash from the discovery of the fabric, but the objects themselves could not provide a timeline. The river had moved first. They were only arriving afterward and mistaking sequence for cause. He entered both possibilities in his notes. Elena might have fought her way onto the bank and been pulled back, or the surge might have lifted her against the fence while she was still in the water. The distinction mattered because one version gave them a path on land, while the other returned every answer to the current. They walked to the fence corner, where a concrete stairway descended toward a narrow landing. The bottom 4 steps had vanished beneath the river. Mud streaked the railing. One streak curved around the metal at the height of a human hand. Miles stared at it. She got out. "She may have reached the stairs," Gideon corrected gently. At the landing, a fresh scrape cut through the green paint on the railing. Aaron photographed it. Gideon held the recovered leash section near the mark without making contact. The metal ring beside the hand loop carried a smear of orange paint. Rosa swept her flashlight across the area. The railing was green. The fence posts were gray. The safety curb was yellow. "No orange here," she said. Gideon looked upstream. Then it came from another contact point. Leah allowed Nix 3 minutes after arrest. Gideon set her down near the upper stair, giving her the sealed sweatshirt again, before opening his hand on the temporary lead. Nix checked the damp railing, then the edge of the path. She moved slowly, nose shifting between the ground and the air. At the bench they had passed earlier, she paused at the left corner. Miles closed his eyes. "Elena sits there to retie her shoes," he said. "Every time. She says the left one loosens because her feet disagree about direction." Nix moved to the next familiar point. A drinking fountain, then a low stone planter where pale ornamental grass bent beneath the rain. These were not clues to Elena's present location. They were pieces of an ordinary routine. A dog remembering where walks slowed, where hands reached down, where a woman waited while one red shoe was tied again. Gideon marked them anyway. A route could become evidence when it met something that did not belong. They reached the public boat ramp. Water covered the final section so evenly that the submerged pavement looked like a continuation of the slope. A person approaching in poor light could take one more step and find no ground beneath it. Rosa crouched at the edge. This fits the fall. Nix approached only until the water touched the claws of her front paws. She recoiled, then turned toward Gideon. He gave her space. She circled once and sniffed a steel post where boaters tied loading lines. A short length of red reflective thread clung beneath a bolt. The leash had caught there. Gideon pictured the sequence without pretending he could see every moment. Nix entered the hidden drop. Elena held the padded loop. The leash pulled across the post until the fibers began to stretch. Elena might have been dragged from stable pavement, or she might have stepped after Nix by choice. Either way, the line failed. The current carried the dog toward the piling where Gideon found her. Elena reached the downstream stair, or fence. Her jacket tore. Then she disappeared again. Point of entry confirmed, Rosa said into her radio. Keep downstream water grid active. Shore Team West continues from Fence 7 toward the old Riverwalk closure. We now have evidence the subject made contact with the West Bank after entry. Miles let out a breath he seemed to have held since the command trailer. So she was alive at the fence. She was moving, Gideon said. That matters. Leah called the time limit. Gideon bent to lift Nix, but the dog stepped away from his hands. Not quickly, deliberately. She turned back downstream. Miles frowned. We just came from there. Nix followed the same higher path until the fence reappeared. She ignored the location of the recovered fabric and continued beyond it. There, the maintained asphalt ended at two metal barricades marked Riverwalk closed. A sycamore had fallen across the route during the storm, its roots lifting a wall of black earth taller than Gideon's shoulders. Leah caught up. This is her final minute. Gideon nodded and moved his hand closer to the harness without touching it. Nix sniffed the nearest barricade. Orange paint flaked from its lower rail. Rosa held the recovered leash ring beside it. The smear matched. Third contact point, Aaron said. Photograph and log it, Rosa replied. The official path turned inland around the closure, but Nix did not follow it. She approached the exposed roots. Wind moved through the torn earth, carrying wet clay, leaves, river mud, and something faintly chemical from the city beyond. The dog tested the air once, twice. Then she changed. Her exhaustion vanished from her posture, not from her body, but from the decision inside it. Nix planted all 4 feet, pivoted away from the walking route, and lunged toward a dark seam beneath the fallen tree. The sudden movement pulled the lead tight. Gideon went with her instead of holding her back. She scrambled over a broken curb and stopped at a concrete wall partly concealed by roots. A narrow horizontal gap ran beneath the Riverwalk, no wider than Gideon's hand. Nix drove her nose toward it and inhaled. Her whole body trembled. She pawed the concrete once, then again, nails scraping pale marks across the wet surface. Elena, Miles called. Gideon raised one hand. Quiet, Nix barked. The sound struck the concrete and returned flattened. Rosa examined the wall. Storm outlet? Too high for the current discharge, Aaron said. Could be ventilation. Gideon knelt beside Nix. A breath of colder air moved through the seam, weak but distinct. Fresh odor could travel out with it. That explained the dog's change better than any idea of her following Elena through the river. Route memory had brought Nix along the path. The moving air had given her something new. Leah knelt on the dog's other side and touched her ribs. She stops now. Nix pawed again. Gideon slipped one arm beneath her and lifted. This time she did not resist, but her gaze remained fixed on the seam. Miles crouched close to the concrete without blocking it. Elena. Only the river answered. Boat engines worked beyond the trees. A drone buzzed above the canopy. Radios traded coordinates and negative findings. The rescue operation had filled the night with so much useful noise that a smaller sound could disappear inside it. Gideon looked at Rosa. She understood before he asked. All units, hold engines, she said into the radio. Radio silence for 30 seconds. One by one, the sounds fell away. The drone moved off. The nearest boat throttled down. Even Miles stopped breathing loudly. Nix rested against Gideon's chest, staring at the black seam. For several seconds, there was nothing but water pressing along the hidden wall. Then something struck concrete from the other side. Once, twice, 3 times. 3 knocks were enough to change a wall into a rescue site. Rosa moved everyone except Gideon and Aaron away from the concrete seam. She marked a red boundary around the fallen sycamore, assigned 1 firefighter to watch the root mass, and ordered the downstream teams to continue their grid until the sound could be confirmed. Hope did not cancel the possibility that Elena was somewhere else. "Knock again if you can hear me," Gideon called. Nothing answered. Nix remained rigid in his arms, nose aimed at the gap. Her breathing had become shallow and fast. Leah took her from him with the firm expression of someone ending a discussion before it began. "She gave you a location," Leah said. "Now you use human equipment." Gideon watched her carry Nix toward the medical blanket. The dog twisted once to look back, then let her head rest against Leah's shoulder. Aaron returned with a telescoping camera pole. The lens was no larger than a coin, surrounded by cold LED lights and mounted on a flexible neck. He fed it into the horizontal seam while Gideon watched the display. The first image showed mud against glass. Aaron withdrew the lens, cleaned it, and changed the angle. This time they saw an interior surface no more than 18 inches away. Rough concrete, wet roots, and a sheet of moving water that reflected the LEDs in broken white lines. "No usable passage from here," Aaron said. "The seam ventilates something, but it isn't an entrance." Rosa requested the drone again. It hovered over the riverwalk and shifted to thermal imaging. On the monitor, the wet ground appeared in layers of gray. The concrete retained the day's warmth as a broad pale band, masking anything beneath it. "Too much material between us and the void," the pilot said. "If someone is under that slab, I can't separate body heat from the structure." The sonar boat worked the channel next. Its operator made 2 slow passes along the bank, adjusting frequency and angle. The screen returned the outer face of the wall, submerged branches, and the hard reflection of the riverbed. Whatever lay behind the wall sat outside the direct path of the signal. None of the tools had failed. Each had described the part of the world it could reach. The trouble was the part hidden between them. Rosa opened the municipal infrastructure layer on her tablet. A thick gray line followed the riverwalk. No chamber appeared behind it. No inspection platform. No outfall. No labeled void. "According to this, we're listening to a solid wall," she said. Miles stood beside Leah's treatment area, one hand resting near Nix without touching her. "Solid walls don't knock." Gideon returned to the seam. The cold air he had felt earlier had weakened, as though rising water was reducing the space behind it. He placed his palm flat against the concrete. At first there was only the steady pressure of the river transmitted through stone. Then a smaller vibration reached his skin. It came once, paused too long, then returned twice in quick succession. Not the even hum of a pump. Not a branch striking with the rhythm of current. Someone was still trying. "Contact," Gideon said. Faint vibration through the wall. Rosa knelt and placed her hand beside his. They waited. The wall trembled once more beneath their palms. Her expression changed, not relief. Commitment. "Find me every retired plan for this section," she told command. "Public Works, Utilities, Parks, County Archive. I don't care which department thinks it owns the paper." The response came 6 minutes later, through a voice Gideon had not heard before. "Captain Alvarez? This is Walter Ames. I maintain the East River Walk. Do you know what's behind this wall? I know what used to be." Walter arrived in an aging pickup with a rotating amber light on the roof. He was 63, narrow through the shoulders, with a gray mustache and work pants permanently marked by concrete dust. He carried a mailing tube under one arm and a ring of keys large enough to anchor a small boat. He stopped when he saw the fallen sycamore. "That tree came down this afternoon?" "During the storm," Rosa said. "Show us the structure." Walter spread a yellow drawing across the hood of Aaron's utility vehicle. It predated the digital map by almost 4 decades. The Riverwalk appeared as a series of hand-drafted cross-sections, each labeled in faded blue ink. Walter tapped a narrow rectangle behind the wall. "Inspection platform." They used it to reach an old storm gate before the upper line was rerouted. The platform runs about 20 feet, then ends at a ladder shaft. "Why isn't it on the current map?" Miles asked. "Because it was decommissioned, not demolished. Somebody scanned the final surface plan and left out anything listed inactive." Walter's face tightened. "It should still be in the archive layer." He ran one blunt finger along the faded notation. "For 31 years," he explained, "crews had been told to preserve old access drawings even after a structure left service. Pipes stayed buried. Walls remained load-bearing. Empty rooms did not vanish simply because a database stopped naming them. Walter had kept the paper copy in his truck after a software migration reduced the old plans to surface outlines. He had expected it to settle arguments about shut-off valves, not to prove that a young woman might be breathing inside a room the city had forgotten how to see. Rosa kept her attention on the drawing. Entrance? Service hatch on the riverside. Should be 5 feet below the old maintenance marker. The hatch location sat directly behind the sycamore roots and the densest debris pile. Gideon traced the cross-section. At ordinary river level, the inspection platform stood several feet above the water. Tonight, the drawing's dry walkway would be almost entirely submerged. A small space might remain near the upper ladder. Could someone be pushed inside from the river? He asked. Walter studied the waterline. If the outer grate broke or was forced open, yes. Before that tree packed everything against it, the sequence became visible. Elena had reached the stair and fence. The current pulled her away again, pressed her along the wall, then drove her through the damaged opening. Debris followed, sealing the route behind her. Nix, smaller and farther from the bank, continued downstream until her leash caught the piling. It was still a theory. The knocks made it a theory with a pulse. Leah called Gideon over. Nix lay beneath the thermal blanket with oxygen near her muzzle. Her eyes followed him, tired but alert. Walter's drawing showed a ventilation line, ending 12 feet north of the seam where she had first alerted. Gideon did not ask her to stand. He carried her along the safe side of the wall, while Leah walked beside them. At the point marked on the plan, Nix lifted her head. Air moved through a crack no wider than a pencil. She sniffed, pressed her nose toward it, and gave one low bark. Then she let her head fall heavily against Gideon's arm. Gideon's heart lurched before Leah checked her again. "Exhaustion," Leah said. "She's breathing. She's done." Nix opened one amber eye, as if offended by the conclusion, but she did not lift her head again. Gideon carried her directly to the veterinary van. Miles climbed inside beside her, Elena's sweatshirt still sealed in the bag on his lap. "Go find her," Miles told him. Back at the wall, Rosa had divided the rescue into problems. Stabilize the root plate, restrain the largest branches. Clear only enough debris to expose the service hatch. Establish anchors on 2 independent structures. Place a downstream safety team in case the opening released more water than expected. No one rushed the list, though every person understood the clock. Aaron drove a steel picket into compacted ground beyond the lifted roots and rejected it when the first load test shifted the soil. The crew moved the primary line to a concrete bollard, wrapped edge protection around the contact point, and tested it with 2 rescuers leaning their combined weight into the system. A second line ran to the bridge column at a different angle. If the root mass rolled, one anchor might fail. The other had to remain outside the same path of failure. Gideon inspected the proposed line path with Aaron. Primary anchor at the concrete bollard, secondary around the bridge column, padded at the edge. No single point dependence. He checked the gates of both carabiners, then asked Aaron to check them again. There had been a time when Gideon would have considered the second inspection wasted motion. That was before one hurried decision in dark water taught him how quickly confidence could become a story, a person told after missing something small. Tonight he did not need to be the fastest man at the wall. He needed to be the man the rope could bring home with Elena attached to him. Rosa nodded. "You enter only after both tests loaded." "Understood. You remain clipped from entry to exit." He knew why she made him say it. "I remain clipped." Walter stood over his drawing with a flashlight. "There's one more problem." He pointed to a water level gauge printed beside the ladder shaft. Rosa compared it with the current reading from command, then added the updated tide and upstream runoff estimate. The numbers left 27 minutes before the water reached the highest marked edge of the inspection platform. "If she's at the ladder," Walter said, "that's when the remaining airspace begins to disappear." Chainsaws could not be used safely against water-loaded branches, so the crew worked with hydraulic cutters and hand lines. Each movement had to be controlled. Pull the wrong limb, and the root mass could roll toward the hatch or release a wall of debris into the rescuers. Gideon clipped his scratched orange whistle beneath his vest so it could not catch. Around him, the team tightened anchors, tested ropes, and opened a path one measured piece at a time. 22 minutes. He returned to the wall and placed his palm against it. "Elena, we're coming in. Knock if you hear me." The river pressed cold through the concrete. He waited for the faint vibration that had answered before. Nothing came back. Rosa made Gideon repeat the rules while the river tried to erase them. Primary tether stays connected from entry to exit. Connected from entry to exit. Turnaround signal is 3 hard pulls. You feel it? You come back whether you've reached her or not. 3 pulls. Immediate return. If you lose communications, you stop advancing. Stop and signal. She tightened the shoulder strap of his rescue vest herself. You are not going in there alone. The line puts all of us in there with you. Gideon looked past her at the wall. Understood. The crew had exposed the upper corner of the service hatch, but the Sycamore still pressed most of its weight across the opening. Aaron and 2 firefighters restrained the trunk with tensioned lines, while another operator used a hydraulic cutter on the smaller branches. Each cut shifted the debris a fraction. Mud poured through the gaps. The root plate groaned but remained inside the red safety boundary. They did not clear the whole hatch. Doing so could release the current behind the debris and turn the entrance into a funnel. Instead, they opened a triangular space near the upper edge, wide enough for one rescuer wearing a low-profile harness. Walter Ames checked the old drawing one final time. Platform begins 6 feet inside. Ladder shaft is at the far end, slightly left. Any cross passage? Gideon asked. 1 drain channel below the platform, too narrow for a person. Rosa clipped a secondary retrieval line to the rescue harness, folded against Gideon's chest. This one belongs to Elena. Don't mix them. Aaron secured a waterproof communication lead alongside Gideon's primary tether and tested the throat microphone beneath his helmet. The cable would keep Rosa's voice with him, even when concrete and water blocked an ordinary radio signal. He touched each connection in order, his own tether at the back, guide line at his right side, Elena's line at the front, 3 separate paths home. 14 minutes to projected platform coverage, command reported. Rosa lowered her face shield. Go. Gideon entered feet first through the upper corner. Water seized his legs before his boots found the interior wall. He turned sideways, protected his mask with 1 arm, held 1 breath, and eased beneath the concrete lip. The outside lights disappeared behind brown water. His own lamp showed less than a yard. Silt filled the beam like smoke. The entrance lip submerged him for only a few seconds. Beyond it, the water dropped to his chest and left a narrow band of air beneath the ceiling, just high enough for his helmet if he crouched. He cleared the water from his mask, kept his mouth above the surface, and followed the guideline by touch. Inside, he said through the radio. Visibility near 0, current moderate at entry, weaker beyond the lip. Rosa's voice returned cleanly. Copy, line team has you. His boots struck metal, the inspection platform. It had once been a graded walkway above an empty channel. Now, water covered it to his chest. Gideon found the inner rail with his left hand and moved forward 1 deliberate step at a time. The grating shuddered beneath each step. Water rose through its openings and pressed the fabric of his suit against his legs, then drained back just enough to tempt him into moving faster. He refused the invitation. His right hand advanced the guideline. His left checked the rail before each transfer of weight. Behind him, the tether carried small signals from the shore team. 1 light touch to confirm movement, a pause when they adjusted around the hatch, another touch when the line was ready. He could not see Rosa or Aaron, but their attention traveled with him through the rope. The passage narrowed where debris had passed through before the outer hatch became blocked. Leaves and plastic wrapped around the railing, a branch pressed diagonally from floor to ceiling. He ducked beneath it and felt his tether slide across the bark behind him. 1 obstruction at 8 feet, he reported. Line still free. His light caught 5 pale streaks on the wall. Fingers. A hand had dragged through the mud before the water climbed over the mark. Gideon touched nothing. He angled the camera on his helmet toward it, letting the team outside see. Evidence of passage, Rosa said. Continue. 2 steps later, his boot struck something soft. He reached down and lifted a red running shoe from beneath the railing. 1 lace remained tied. Miles had described Elena's shoes at the command trailer. Red, because she said the river path needed 1 color brighter than concrete. I have her shoe, Gideon said. The line behind him tightened once, a reminder of the clock. 10 minutes to projected coverage, Rosa reported. Gideon acknowledged and forced himself not to translate the number into panic. Forecasts described the outside gauge, not the exact water inside this forgotten chamber. They could be early, they could be late. The only useful fact was that the margin was shrinking. He placed the shoe inside the mesh pocket of his vest, checked that its lace could not foul the guideline, and kept moving. The inner railing had bent toward the ladder shaft, leaving an opening barely wide enough for shoulders. Beyond it, the ceiling sloped downward. "Elena!" No voice answered, only water moved through the grating beneath him, pulling at his knees. His lamp passed over concrete, pipe brackets, a rusted valve wheel. The ladder should have been visible. For 1 second he wondered if the old drawing had reversed the shaft, or if a later repair had sealed it. Then he caught something sharp and green in the thin air. Eucalyptus, or what he thought was eucalyptus. It came faintly through mud, rust, wet concrete, and the rubber of his own equipment. Miles had mentioned the shampoo when he brought Elena's sweatshirt. The association might have been memory supplying what Gideon wanted to find, so he did not call it proof. Gideon turned his head toward a pocket above the bent railing. "Elena, I'm here." Something moved beyond the edge of his light. That was proof. He pushed through the narrow opening and found the ladder. Elena clung to its upper rungs with both arms. Her green rain shell had torn across one shoulder. Water covered everything below her chest, and the sloping ceiling left only inches between her face and the concrete. Her eyes opened when his light reached her. They were unfocused, but alive. "Nix," she whispered. "She's safe." The words changed her grip. Not much. Enough that Gideon saw how close she had been to letting go. "I'm Gideon. I'm going to secure a harness around you. Keep your arms on the ladder until I tell you." Elena nodded once. He moved beside her, taking part of her weight against his shoulder while he unfolded the rescue sling. Her hands were stiff with cold. She tried to help and could not make her fingers close around the strap. "You don't have to do the work now," he said. "We brought people for that." He passed the sling beneath her arms, locked the front connection, and clipped Elena's retrieval line. Then he gave 2 pulls, subject secured. Rosa answered twice. "We're coming out," Gideon told Elena. He guided her off the ladder. She gasped when the current took her legs, but the harness held. Gideon placed her in front of him and began backing through the opening. The first 6 feet went smoothly. The outside team recovered line in short, controlled increments. Elena kept her chin above the shrinking air gap, while Gideon supported her from behind. Then his tether stopped. The current pushed him forward, but the line locked hard across his back. He reached behind and felt it running down toward the bent railing. The tether had slipped beneath a curled section of steel during his turn. "Hold pull," he said. Primary snagged. The line went still. Elena's breathing sharpened. "What's wrong?" "A rope needs a better angle." He could see the carabiner at his shoulder. One press, one twist, and he could disconnect. The old solution arrived whole. Remove the restriction, carry Elena through. Become the only moving part that mattered. For years, that impulse had worn the face of courage. It had also worn the fluorescent light of an inquiry room 2 years earlier, where Gideon had listened to a rescue instructor describe his decision as tactically understandable and operationally unsound. A trainee had survived that night, but a second swimmer had been forced into a current that should never have held 2 people. Gideon remembered defending every choice because admitting fear seemed worse than admitting error. What stayed with him was not the reprimand. It was the quiet question Rosa had later asked. "Who carries you when you decide the line no longer applies?" Gideon left the carabiner closed. "Rosa, snag is under the bent inner rail. I need slack on primary, tension on Elena's line, then a right side pull on my guide." "Copy. Stay connected." Staying connected. The outside team shifted the system. Elena's harness tightened gently, holding her position. Gideon's primary line softened. A pull came through the guide at his right hip. He waded through the first change instead of fighting it. The current rocked Elena against his chest, and he kept one forearm beneath her shoulders while the line team reset. Rosa called each adjustment over the radio. Aaron fed 6 inches of slack. The secondary crew held Elena's line steady. A downstream rescuer confirmed that the hatch flow remained controlled. No single person could see the whole problem, but together they built a picture more complete than the darkness in front of Gideon's mask. He rotated with it. The tether slid an inch, caught, then rose over the steel with a vibration he felt through his spine. "Primary free. Bring them home," Rosa said. The team resumed the extraction. At the branch obstruction, Gideon lowered Elena beneath the wood while Aaron controlled her line from outside. Light appeared through the triangular opening, first gray, then white enough to erase the darkness around it. Hands reached through the hatch. Elena went out first. Rosa and Aaron lifted her onto the waiting board, while medics wrapped her in dry insulation and oxygen. Gideon followed on his own tether, boots striking the riverbank as the crew pulled him clear. Behind them, water surged higher inside the hatch and swallowed the line where Elena's face had been. She coughed, opened her eyes, and caught Gideon's sleeve before the medics moved her. "Nix," she said again. Gideon looked toward the veterinary van, where one amber eye watched through the open side door. "She's safe," he told Elena. "She found you." Elena Velis spent the night beneath warm hospital blankets, while Nick spent it beneath a veterinary oxygen hood 3 miles away. Both had been taken from the same river. Both woke more than once searching for the other. Gideon learned that from Miles, who moved between the hospital and Leah's clinic, with the determined exhaustion of a man refusing to sit in either waiting room for long. At 2 in the morning, he brought Rosa paper cups of coffee and gave Gideon a dry sweatshirt that said, "Pause before paperwork" across the front. "It's Elena's," Miles explained. "She'd want it used in an emergency." Gideon looked at the bright paw prints across his chest. "This is the emergency? Your other shirt smells like the river." Rosa accepted her coffee. He's right. By dawn, Elena's temperature had returned to a safe range. Her lungs remained clear enough that the physician expected observation rather than intensive treatment. Nix had responded to oxygen, warmed fluids, and rest. Leah sent an update with 3 clinical sentences and a final photograph of one amber eye glaring through the recovery kennel. Rosa studied the picture. "She looks offended." Leah told her she couldn't conduct another search, Gideon said. "Career disappointment." The humor lasted only a moment, but it loosened something the night had held too tightly. Elena gave her statement after sunrise. Gideon was not required to be in the room. He sat outside the half-open door, while Rosa took notes and Miles remained beside the bed. Elena's voice was weak, yet the sequence she described matched the evidence along the riverwalk. She had left the apartment after the power flickered and the rain eased. The upper path looked clear. At the boat ramp, floodwater had spread over the concrete in a smooth brown sheet, hiding the point where pavement became open water. Nick stepped into the drop. Elena caught the harness handle before the dog went under, but the sudden pull took her off balance. She kept hold of the leash while both slid down the submerged slope. The line snagged around the steel post. For several seconds it held them close to the ramp. Then the fibers stretched and separated. "I thought holding tighter would keep us together," Elena said. "It only meant the river had both of us." The current pushed her toward the downstream stairs. She caught the railing, climbed high enough to tear her rain shell on the fence, and tried to call Nix. A branch struck the rail and forced her back into the water before she could get over it. She remembered the wall arriving beside her, concrete against one shoulder, then an opening behind a mass of roots. The water drove her through it. Inside, her shoe caught beneath the railing. She pulled free and found the ladder by touch. She had no idea where Nix went. "I kept hearing her bark," Elena said, "but I think that was just because I needed to." Gideon looked down at the scratched orange whistle hanging against the borrowed sweatshirt. The real dog had been hundreds of yards downstream, fighting for her own breath. Loyalty did not require magic. Sometimes surviving long enough to try again was miracle enough. Elena left the hospital late that morning with instructions to rest and return if her breathing changed. Miles drove her directly to Leah's clinic, where Gideon and Rosa waited near the rear entrance. Leah had arranged a quiet recovery room away from the barking kennels. Someone handed Gideon another cup of coffee. He took one swallow and discovered it had been sitting on a warmer long enough to become bitter in a permanent way. The taste was still on his tongue when he heard claws crossing the corridor, slow, uneven, coming closer. Leah entered first, holding a broad support lead attached to Nix's harness. The German Shepherd walked beside her with a blanket draped across her back. Elena was seated behind the partially open door, out of the dog's direct view. Nix stopped, her nose lifted. She drew one breath, then another. The uncertainty left her body before her eyes found the room. She stepped around Leah, followed the scent through the doorway, and saw Elena. No one called her name. No one encouraged her forward. Nix crossed the remaining distance and pressed her muzzle beneath Elena's open hand. Elena folded over her without pulling, one palm resting behind the dog's folded ear. Nix leaned against her knees and closed her eyes. The room stayed quiet enough to hear both of them breathing. The new leash lay coiled on the floor between them, unused for the moment. Its red fabric was brighter than the one recovered from the mud, and Leah had chosen a clasp strong enough for Nix's weight without pretending any piece of equipment could make the world predictable. Elena traced the edge of the harness as if counting each place it had held. Nix answered by shifting closer, careful of Elena's hospital wristband. Neither needed to reenact the river. Recognition was the only proof they asked from each other. Miles turned toward the window. Rosa studied the floor. Leah checked Nix's posture because care was the form her tenderness usually took. Gideon stood nearest the door. He had seen reunions made loud by relief, people holding so tightly that love looked almost like fear. This one needed nothing from the witnesses. A woman had spent hours calling a dog's name beneath concrete. A dog had crossed a river path until strangers finally understood what she was asking. Elena looked up at him. "You went back for me." "Nix gave us a place to look. Miles said you found the entrance. Walter found the plan. Rosa built the operation. Aaron and the line teams opened the hatch. Leah kept Nix alive long enough to show us the vent." Rosa glanced at him. "He's becoming difficult to compliment." "It's a developing skill," Gideon said. Elena smiled, tired but real. "Then thank all of them for me. You'll have the chance." The chance came sooner than Gideon expected. By afternoon, a local camera crew waited outside the rescue station. Someone had recorded the dog being carried from the river, and the short video had traveled farther than any official statement. The reporter wanted the Navy SEAL who had gone beneath the riverwalk. Gideon stood beside Rosa during the briefing and corrected the premise before the first question ended. "One person entered the chamber," he said. "A full team made the rescue." He named the boat crews that continued downstream in case the first theory proved wrong. He named Aaron, Leah, Walter, Miles, Rosa, and Nix. He explained that the dog's behavior became useful because it was tested against physical evidence. He did not call her a trained rescue animal. He did not say she understood maps or water flow. She knew Elena's scent, remembered their route, and refused to stop asking people to look. That was enough. The riverwalk remained closed while engineers inspected the damaged section. The review uncovered a practical failure rather than a villain. The old inspection platform had been removed from everyday maintenance schedules, but remained physically accessible from the river after storm debris damaged its outer grate. No one had designed the night that trapped Elena. No one had wanted it. Wanting was not the only measure of what required repair. Within days, the Parks Department placed a temporary high-water barrier above the submerged portion of the ramp. Rescue rings appeared at marked intervals, and warning signs showed the hidden drop rather than relying on words alone. A permanent gate entered expedited review. Walter's paper drawings became the first set in a larger project to scan inactive structures into the emergency map layer. Rosa added one more change to the training program. Animal behavior could establish a search lead, but every lead had to be documented, tested, and balanced against existing search obligations. She handed Gideon the draft 3 weeks later. "Your philosophy, unfortunately." He read the sentence twice. "Needs fewer commas." "That's your contribution? Precision matters. I preferred you when you jumped into rivers without editorial notes." But he signed the review as a supporting instructor. 2 weeks after that, Elena and Nix returned to the Riverwalk. The damaged lower section remained closed, so they used the elevated path behind the temporary gate. Miles came with them but stayed near a bench, pretending to answer messages while watching every step. Gideon and Rosa were finishing a training inspection when Nix saw him. Her gait had returned to normal. A new red leash ran from her harness to Elena's wrist, with a secondary loop secured around Elena's palm. Nix approached Gideon, sniffed his boots, and leaned once against his leg. "Is that official thanks?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "She's checking whether you still smell like river mud. And the verdict is private." They walked together as far as the new railing. Below them, the Passaic moved within its banks, carrying leaves and reflected sky beneath the late summer light. It had not become gentle. Rivers did not apologize or promise to remember what they had almost taken. People had to do the remembering. At the gate, Nix paused. She looked toward the water, then back at Elena. The new leash remained loose between them. Elena touched the dog's shoulder, and they continued along the higher path. Gideon's scratched orange whistle rested against his chest. For once he did not raise it, issue a command, or try to make the moment mean more than it did. He listened as Nix walked beside Elena, the quiet rhythm of her paws carrying them safely home. Gideon entered the river, believing courage meant becoming the strongest person in the current. He came out understanding something harder. Strength also means remaining connected. When his tether caught beneath the steel, he could have trusted only his own hands. Instead, he trusted Rosa's voice, Aaron's line, and the unseen team carrying part of Elena's weight. That choice brought both of them home. Nyx offered a different lesson. She did not solve a mystery with magic. She remembered a familiar path, recognized the scent of the person she loved, and refused to stop asking for attention. Her loyalty mattered because people finally became quiet enough to notice it. Walter's forgotten drawing and Rosa's careful decisions did the rest. A dog gave them a question. Patient human hands turned it into an answer. The scratched orange whistle and Elena's new red leash carried the same truth in opposite ways. One was made to send a command. The other existed to keep two lives connected. By the end, neither needed to be pulled tight. There is something each of us can do with that lesson. Before walking near high water, tell someone your route. Notice where pavement disappears beneath the surface. Learn where the rescue rings are. And when a person or an animal behaves as though something is wrong, do not rush to invent a miracle. Pause, look again, and test what their actions may be showing you. Sometimes grace arrives as a rescue team. Sometimes it waits inside an old paper map. And sometimes it stands on tired paws, facing the direction everyone else has forgotten to search. If this story reminded you of someone who never stopped looking for you, share it with them. Tell us in the comments whether you would have trusted Nyx and followed her upstream. And if stories of loyalty, courage, and second chances matter to you, subscribe and turn on notifications so we can meet again for the next one.